Welcome into Locked On Phillies. Now, that last night was a performance worthy of the 2022 Philadelphia Phillies roster. They take down the Colorado Rockies. We'll take a look at that and preview a pitching matchup that we've seen already this year in today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I am your host, Connor Thomas. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So excited to be with you here as the host of Locked On Phillies. I talk baseball over on 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio all the time. It's my day job, but I'm so happy to be here doing this with you, especially on days like today when we get to talk about Philadelphia Phillies victories. The Phillies take down the Colorado Rockies by a score of 8-2 last night at Citizens Bank Park. And this is one of the few times this year that I've looked at it like, hey, that's a quality win by this ball club. Sometimes they'll just, I'll take everyone being quality, but that's a quality game in general. And it wasn't like the Athletic series where you took 2 of 3 from a team that's supposed to be not that good, or other series where you had already lost a series and you were trying to steal a game. Nope, this is a series opening win, and it feels better even than the one that they had against the Milwaukee Brewers in the previous series here at Citizens Bank Park. So let's talk through how exactly the Phillies got to that 8-2 victory that they pulled off last night. A little bit of luck, but a solid bit of good play from the Phillies in this one. So the pitching matchup we'd seen just last week, Kyle Gibson and Kyle Freeland faced off again. Kyle Freeland now 0-3 after this one, a rough start to the year for him, especially going ahead and taking a peek at what he's doing. Never mind. I thought it was actually better than that. I guess last night didn't help. But the 6.16 ERA is a clear indicator of why Kyle Freeland is 0-3 on the season. Kyle Gibson moves to 2-1 with his second win of the season. He had 5 2/3 innings pitched, only 2 earned runs, struck out 4, so not a lot of strikeouts, and walked 2, but he was just efficient. He really didn't give up that many hits. He allowed 3 through that 5 2/3 innings, and then the bullpen by the Phillies. We'll talk about them when we get to that point. But let's go ahead and run through the scoring plays to see what exactly happened as runners crossed the plate in this one. Now, the scoring got started early. It was not great. Top of the first inning, Kyle Gibson, first at bat. Connor Joe, the leadoff guy for the Colorado Rockies. Yeah, you start off a game with a 426-foot home run given up. That's not really a good sign for how the night's going to go. But Kyle Gibson settled in after that, even though Colorado got 1 in the top of the first, and then the Phillies were scoreless in the bottom of the second. Then Randall Grichuk homers to left, 392 feet on that one. Not as far as the towering shot that Connor Joe hit, but 2-0 right off the bat. You go, okay, well, the Phillies are going to have to fight their way back in on this one, and Kyle Gibson's going to have to settle down. But this is a constant debate among people who follow baseball and pitchers too. Some pitchers prefer the home run as opposed to a string of hits over and over and over again. And all that was happening was Kyle Gibson was getting beat on one pitch. Now, for me, when I used to pitch back in the day in college and semi-pro ball, the home run didn't bother me because it was one mistake pitch. I could give up 2 singles and have 2 mistake pitches and not give up a run. And that would feel like a worse inning to me by what I was trying to execute. So sometimes you just get burned on one pitch, and that happened to Kyle Gibson in each of the first 2 innings. But then in the bottom of the third, JT Realmuto doubled to deep left field with Rhys Hoskins and Bryce Harper on base, scoring Rhys Hoskins, putting the Phillies only 1 run down. And then, well, the Phillies got a little bit lucky. Kyle Schwarber came up, and he hits a fly ball to right center field that was right next to Charlie Blackmon, but right at the end, deep down there in the right center field alley, the Colorado Rockies outfield just lost track of the ball. It drops cleanly into right center, deep right center, and Kyle Schwarber ends up on second. Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto both end up scoring on the play to give the Philadelphia Phillies, a 3-2 lead that they wouldn't relinquish at all in the game. Then in the bottom of the 5th, with Kyle Freeland still pitching, but near the end of his rope, Bryce Harper comes up and hits a moonshot to center field. An absolute nuke, 417 feet. We've seen him do it a bunch of times, and that gives the Phillies the 2-run lead that makes them feel like they can breathe a little bit easier. Then the bottom of the 7th, they get to the bullpen, and Bryce Harper has a sacrifice fly to center field, scoring Gene Segura to start it off. Rhys Hoskins goes to third, scores on a wild pitch in the next at bat, and then Alec Bohm grounds into a fielder's choice, but allows Nick Castellanos to score in that inning. So 5 on the Harper sacrifice fly, 6 on the wild pitch by Goodell, and then Alec Bohm gets. Oh well, actually, I forgot to mention. JT Realmuto scored on an error on that same play. So Bohm grounds into a fielder's choice, but the error allows Nick Castellanos and JT Realmuto both to come home. Final score of 8-2. And the bullpen for the Phillies, who we talked about last episode, not a great start to the year. One of the worst in baseball. It was the worst bullpen ERA going into yesterday's game in baseball, or 2 games ago, the Milwaukee Brewers series ender, rather. So you look at that, and you're like, okay, well, they need a bounce back. Seranthony Dominguez gives you 1/3 of an inning, 1 hit, no runs, no earned runs, no walks, no Ks. Perfect. George Familia comes in, 1 inning, perfect inning. Norwood comes in, 1 inning, 1 K, perfect inning. Bailey Falter comes in, gives up 1 hit in the 9th, but hey, look at that. Gets out without any runs, no earned, no walks, no Ks. It was basically a statless night for the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen. Only 2 hits given up, only 1 strikeout. And you know what? I'll take that. I don't need these guys to strike guys out. I need them to keep guys off base and not give up runs at big spots where teams can get back into ball games. And last night, Dominguez, Familia, Norwood, Falter, they all did that. So that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It was just a complete game by the Philadelphia Phillies. And it's why I wasn't too worried about them with their struggles earlier in the year. Because we'd seen a strong game from the bullpen before. We'd seen strong starts from some of the starters. We'd seen strong offensive performances. And you knew if they could put it all together, they were capable of putting together games like this and going on a streak. Well, guess what? That's what they did last night, and it sets them up in perfect position to at least split this series with the Rockies, a 4-game set. So game 2 tonight, 3 tomorrow, 4 on Thursday in a day game. But you've got an opportunity now. If you win tonight, you've already got a series split, and you get 2 opportunities to win the series outright by taking 3 of the 4 games against the Rockies. It was a great performance. So I have no qualms at all. Kyle Gibson has looked really, really good so far this year. Aaron Nola looked good yesterday in 2 days ago, rather, in the Angel Hernandez game. But, I mean, the pitching staff will be fine. The bullpen is my more concerned area, and last night they looked good. So every positive outcome for the bullpen is a step in the right direction for this team. And when they put up 8 runs on a solid Colorado Rockies team, yeah, you'll take that. Bryce Harper starting to get hot. Nick Castellanos has scored a good number of runs. Kyle Schwarber gets lucky, and sometimes you need those to try and fully break through. The offense is starting to warm up. It's like when you see the bubbles at the bottom of the pot when you're heating water. Like the water isn't boiling yet, but the bubbles are starting to form down there on the bottom of the pot before you put the pasta in. That's what the Phillies offense is right now. They're not boiling. They're not hot yet, but that water is starting to show signs of boiling. So you like to see that. And coming up next, we're going to talk about a pitching matchup that we've already seen, a pitcher that the Phillies handled pretty well last time they saw him out there in Colorado, and why I think the Phillies can go for a second straight win in tonight's ball game. First, though, I want to tell you about Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's baseball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. Well, we're already in pretty good swing with Major League Baseball. You can get some numbers on how the teams are trending and try and make some money there with BetOnline, because BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. I also want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Make another listen of yours Locked On Now. It's immediate reaction videos from our experts who cover Major League Baseball teams across the majors. You can get immediate reactions on game happenings, big news, everything that goes on a day-to-day basis, not just with the Phillies, but with the entirety of Major League Baseball. And it's only available here on the Locked On Network. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts, but the only place you can get this up-to-date information in this style with our passionate hosts and experts who cover these teams is through Locked On Now. Make sure you check it out. A little bit of an audible here, actually. We have a snippet of a crossover that I did with Sully, Paul Francis Sullivan. You hear me talk about him, Locked On MLB. You know how great he is because I tell you all the time, and he knows baseball inside and out. We had a great chat about the Philadelphia Phillies, the nature of Philadelphia and this fan base, and what the expectations are for the team this year. A full episode will be out on that later this week, but I want to give you a little bit of a free preview, if you will, in this segment. We'll do a little snippet of my crossover with Sully next. But that was a great lead-in. The great lead-in to the ad was what carried it. That was like Ryan Madsen setting up Brad Lidge back in the day. It was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I didn't serve one up the pool holes. Let me tell you, by the way, I'm convinced that Brad Lidge made a deal with the devil.
Oh, absolutely. How do you go perfect that year? And then it was crazy.
It was crazy. But hey, speaking of deals with the devil, let's talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. Look, it's way too early. It's way too early to get, I think, angry about anything. And I think that the track record that both Dombrowski and Girardi have should make people say, hey, let's not go bananas here, even though the Phillies, who are playing right now against, as we're recording this, are playing against the Colorado Rockies. So neither you nor I know what's going to happen in that game. That being said, best case scenario, they're going to be 8-10. Worst case scenario, they're going to be 7-11. Get a Slurpee. Not a sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. But yeah, they're off to a crummy start. And one reason they're off to a crummy start is Zach Wheeler has stunk. When you have your ace stink, that sort of thing happens. We saw Nola pitched well. Gibson had at least one really good game. I think that and Knebel and Hand have been pretty good out of the bullpen so far. So, Harper has not been great, but he's driving in a lot of runs, which I know I'm not supposed to pay attention to, but that does help you win games. Obviously we remember what happened with the Phillies last year, that they briefly were the team in first to take away the division from the Mets until they decided that it was probably best to have the Atlanta Braves win it. But I think this team, this is a flawed division. I think the Mets are off to a great start. The last time they went off to a great start was last year. And I think this is the team that could contend for the division or maybe one of the wild card spots if everything comes together. What's the mood there in Philadelphia for the team? Obviously, they can't be thrilled with how they've started it, but they haven't hit the panic button yet, have they?
You know what? Some people are reaching for it already. And part of that is just the nature of Philadelphia sports fan. You're a New Englander. You're a Northeast guy. You know how it is here. It's a lot more tense as far as a fan base is concerned. And when you come in with this expectation, you go into the luxury tax for the first time in Phillies history, and you spend on guys like Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber to come in. The expectations are, okay, we're all in. That playoff drought ends this year. And so they immediately come under a microscope for probably the first month of the season. And then as the summer rolls around, people settle in. People start, it'll be the dog days of summer, a lot less tense, and they'll allow the team to develop more. But it's that first couple weeks microscope coupled with you lose 4 of your first 5 series on the year after going out and spending that money. And the main thing people are pointing to is Joe Girardi. A lot of people around here, I've had a couple people, a couple sports talk show hosts talk to me and say, is Girardi possibly getting fired if they get swept by the Brewers prior to that Brewers series that they just played at home?
Right.
Which is a crazy thought, being that was the 5th series of the year. But it's what people are saying here. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that's very hasty. But it's just that early season microscope for a team that hasn't had a lot of success recently. And now you feel like you're close. So every failure, every lost series feels a little bit bigger in the minds of fans. So they're certainly zoned in on this team. And it's impatience because of the time that they've already spent over the past decade of Phillies baseball missing the playoffs. It's like, this has to be the year, or I don't know what's going to happen, even though, of course, last year had to be the year, and the year before that had to be the year. So this fan base will keep coming back. It's a passionate baseball town, but right now the microscope's certainly on them. And there's a feeling, like I said, of impatience around here.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things that probably adds to the impatience. The fact that the Mets are off to such a great start,
For sure.
that it's the Mets. If it was the Marlins, then I think maybe it would be less of a stick in the eye. But the fact that it's the Mets off to this great start, and I'm talking to a lot of Mets fans. I know a lot of Met fans. Please don't judge me, but I know a lot of Met fans who feel, because of what happened last year, that they were in first place for about 2/3 of the season, more than 2/3 of the season. And they finished the season with a losing record, a sub 500 record, despite being in first place and with virtually no competition for the first 2/3 of the season. And that the team that leapfrogged them got a parade. And they kind of look at that parade thinking, that should have been us. I'm sure there's a little bit of that going on with the Phillies fans. The one thing I would say, or the many things I would say that would talk them off the ledge, is not just the fact that Girardi has a good track record. Dombrowski has a good track record. And this is really Girardi's second full season as the manager of the Phillies. The first year was the COVID year, and you almost have to take that with a grain of salt because, it was just 60 games. It's like, imagine, where you're at in the season around Memorial Day, and that's how we're going to judge your entire year. And so they did have a winning year for the first time since Ryan Howard fell in a heap under Girardi. And so I would just say that, look at, this is what, 2.5 weeks into the season of a shortened, with a shortened spring training. The key is if Wheeler finds his groove and Nola continues to pitch well, I have no question. I have no hesitation that the offense, obviously Harper had an amazing year last year. Castellanos is off to a great start. Schwarber's just going to be fun. Realmuto is going to hit. Hoskins is going to hit. Gregorius is going to hit. Bryson Stott didn't hit, but maybe he can come up and fix it. There's too much talent on this offense that if they pitch well, this is easily an 85, 86 win team. And if a ball bounces this way or that, who knows? That could be enough to get them in the playoff contention.
I completely agree with you. And I think Zach Wheeler is going to come around. He had a shortened spring training because he had a bit of a shoulder issue. He got flu-like symptoms when he was getting ramped up to get ready for not starting opening day because of that shoulder issue, but for that first series. And of course, spring training shortened already this year because of everything going on with the lockout. So, and on top of that, last year in his Cy Young runner-up season, he was rode heavy by this team. A lot of innings, a lot of workload. So it's something that I think it's just going to take him a little bit more time to work in. I don't doubt the ability. I just think it's a slower start for him. And I'm fine with that because this offense has had its dips and the bullpen is not where we thought it was going to be, even though you didn't think it was going to be a great bullpen. They've shown
but think of where they were a couple of years.
They were the worst in the history.
They were the worst in the history of baseball.
Man.
So let's just talk about what we're dealing here. We're like, oh, this is not a great bullpen. It was horrific. It was Stephen King level horrifying before.
It was. But what I'm looking at is you bring in these guys, and I don't think they're bad, but they had just a couple days ago the worst ERA in baseball as far as the bullpen's concerned. They're not that bad, is what I'm saying. They're going to be middle of the road, and that's going to be a significant improvement over what they've had in past years.
Mediocre is better than terrible.
Absolutely.
Is better than yikes. And they've had yikes. I mean, think about so many of those series that just got away from the Phillies in the last couple of years where, if their bullpen was even adequate, like last year, if their bullpen was adequate, they may have won 90 games.
Absolutely. 2020, they win the division.
Exactly. Yeah. In the COVID season, right. They would have won it. So I think, I don't know. I think, sometimes I have an interesting perspective. I'm going to dip this Locked On philosophy here. I have an interesting perspective on East Coast baseball now that I live on the West Coast. And don't get me wrong, I lived up in the Bay Area when the Giants were winning those World Series.
Mhm.
And I live here now. I was here for the Dodgers series, and fans. I mean, the Dodgers were one of the biggest draws in all of baseball, and they got, I was just there a couple of weeks ago. There's 50,000 people there. They draw millions of people, and guess what? Angels do too. Guess what? The Giants draw like crazy too. There are super passionate fans who love their baseball, and it's not insane. And I've been able to sort of, as a sociologist, take a look back with a couple of mountain ranges in between 3,000 miles to look at how the Northeasterners talk about baseball. And I see some of the insanity of it. And I know when I was there, I was as guilty as anybody. But the knee-jerk reaction to every tiny pitfall, whether you're in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, wherever, you sit there and go like, would you let the 162 game season unfold?
You're totally right. You're totally right. And here's what the comment has.
Well, I just say you're a call-in radio guy, so yes. I mean, you're like, I'm watching it from afar. You're in the microscope, looking at the amoeba sort of going around there.
I hear from hundreds of people every day who call in and want to fire this coach and want to move on from this player. Part of it, I think, is because, at least in Philadelphia, it's such a football-centric fan base. Even though they love their baseball, it's always an Eagles town. So when you look at that, you look at a 16, now a 17-game season for the NFL, and every loss feels magnified. And that's what people in this area grow up on. So when they look at losses in other sports, it happens with the Sixers and the Flyers as well. Not quite as lengthy as the MLB season, but still 82 games. Mm-hmm. And every game feels like you're hitting the nuclear panic button because they're used to one game impacting so much with the Eagles. So it does take over the mentality and how people are raised as sports fans, at least in Philly. And then the Northeast just naturally. Just a tenser, faster pace. You got to get everything done quickly. So when you're off to the slow start, it affects people more up here. So it's certainly the case. And I have to fight it myself, being in the Northeast my whole life. And even though I know I've seen baseball seasons over and over and over again, I know it doesn't matter until June, July, and you can see teams in last place at that point at the All-Star break. They'll come back, get in, and find a way to win a World Series. But it's hard to fight against that nature of just this area and how fans are brought up and how they react to even losing an early season series to the Milwaukee Brewers or the Colorado Rockies.
It's funny. Like I'm not a huge football fan. I don't dislike football. I just don't follow it.
I got you.
And I didn't grow up in a big football house. When I grew up in the suburbs of Boston, the Patriots stunk.
Yeah.
There was the Steve Grogan that 1 year they went to the Super Bowl and they got clobbered. But most of the time, and they played way out in Foxborough, this nasty aluminum stadium. And this was the era of Larry Bird and all them. So obviously everyone was cheering for the Celtics. But we were a big baseball house.
Right.
And so I understood, especially watching, there was a bunch of years where it was, I found out the opposite, that the Red Sox would get off to this super hot start. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, here we go. And then they would fade, and then the Orioles or the Tigers or the Yankees, whoever would wind up going to the playoffs. And because I grew up, I kind of maybe have a different point of view of following a sports team and understanding that it's like tides. And there's, the best teams, like, the 1998 Yankees lost 45 games or something like that. I mean, it's going to happen. But also, if I grew up on football, you're right. A two-game losing streak, when you have only 16 games, compare that to 162 games in baseball. A 2-game losing streak in football is like a 20-game losing streak in baseball.
Right.
Like, imagine you woke up and we lost the last 2 games. Oh, okay. Well, you're gonna play tomorrow. But if you lost 20 straight games in baseball, like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, that's fire everybody territory.
But then again, if you can go back-to-back wins, then you're the Moneyball A's. So I mean, it's you're right. That is a mentality, and I'll just say, just for my own self, that's one of the reasons why I love baseball. You could have this, like the Mets and the Cardinals played this unbelievably exciting game on Monday evening, and it was a great pitchers matchup. There was heroics. There was weird errors. It was Bananaville. And guess what? They have to play the next day.
Yep.
And that's what I love. It's that comfort food. I go drive home from work. I'm going to listen to a ball game.
Yeah, and they all count the same and everything like that. It's absolutely right. You brought up tides, though. In Philadelphia, often it feels like there aren't tides, they're tidal waves. It's just everything crashes down on you the time a game gets lost, even if it only matters for one of 162. It's a tough nature to be.
But and I made this point this week, the two things that I will say that if you are I think it's more so in the American League than the National League this year, that it's going to be so bunched together that when you have a head-to-head matchup with one of your rivals, even if it's in April, you got to get those wins in. You got to at least pile those wins up so you're not trying to make up for them later. And the other thing is, when you're this early in the season, you're going to have games where you lose. You're going to have a couple of games where you get the doors blown off. And there's going to be some games that are going to be frustrating that you're like, do you know what? We went up against a great pitching staff. Tip your hat. That happened to the Red Sox the other day when they were no hit through 9 innings and they wound up losing an extra. You kind of got to tip your hat, go like, look, they just were great. What you want to avoid are dumb losses. Just those losses like you made mistakes, a mental error, you brought in the wrong pitcher, someone made a base running blunder, because those are the games when you go back, you're like, we missed the playoffs by 1 game, and you look back, and remember that game, the guy ran through the stop sign? We could have won that game. You try to don't lose the dumb games.
Yeah, and the Phillies haven't had any dumb losses yet this year, in my opinion. They've had games where the offense is slumped. They've had games where they've had bad starting pitching performances. They've had games where the bullpen just didn't show up when you needed them to. But in each game, it felt like there was a flash of something, even if they haven't fully put it together yet. And that's why I'm not worried about this team, because I've seen that the offense can be elite, that the starting pitching, we know that they have talent there, that the bullpen has had games where they've had to come in early innings, like the 4th inning. There was a game where Nick Nelson threw like 3 perfect innings for this team in relief.
Yep.
And you're looking at like, okay, these guys have ability. We talked about bullpens in the past, how there were guys that shouldn't be on a major league roster. That's not this year's team. So when they figure it all out and they go on that stretch where all the facets of the game kind of come together, they're going to be a really good ball club. And you're right, they're going to be an 85, 86. They could push up to 90 wins if things bounce their way. So I'm not worried about them. It's just when you see the offense slump and you pay this amount of money, the average fan sees that and they think, well, I was told they were supposed to hit 8 home runs a game, and now I'm going to panic because they just got shut out. It's just a tough mentality early in the season when you expect something a certain way, and you've got to let it more shake out.
Well, what I got to say to some of those fans who are like hitting the panic button based upon how things are going when we're less than 20 games in the season is just remember that, Wheeler is a legitimate Cy Young contender when healthy. If he gets himself going and Nola gets himself going, Harper's going to start to hit. Schwarber's going to at least be hitting a few moonshots out of there. Then, it's just going to be an easy bet to say that the Phillies are going to be a winning season. They're going to have a winning season for their fans and are going to be exciting.
This episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. You know the story with Rock Auto. There's always new cars and trucks out there. And if you're like me, not really a car person, it's hard to keep up with all of that and all the changes you have to do. Well, your local store, they're not doing as great of a job as they could be. That's because Rock Auto is just whooping them up and down when it comes to your best place to find parts to repair your car or truck. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto, because when you go to the other store, you're choosing to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more in some cases for the same exact parts. Why pay for the markup? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and their prices have been reliably low for that whole entire time. They know exactly what you need, and you can do it online. You don't have to walk into an auto parts store where some guy behind the counter tries to figure out what you need. No, you can find it on Rock Auto, and they're very easy-to-use website. It's available on your laptop. You can also find it right on your mobile device. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all of the parts available for your car or truck, and make sure you write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know that we sent you in. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. That's about all I have for you for today's episode. But one last thing that I want to get into before we go. So I want to say a little thank you to a special Philly who was a big part of the Phillies 2021 season. Ronald Torreyes, today he requested a release and was granted release from his minor league contract with the Philadelphia Phillies, looking at the backup at infield with Bryson Stott getting sent down in favor of Roman Quinn for more outfield help. Torreyes could tell that Stott, Camargo, Bohm, Gregorius, Segura, Hoskins, all above him in those infield rankings when it comes to the Philadelphia Phillies organization. And he had a great year last year. I don't blame him for wanting to try his hand elsewhere. Just wanted to take the time to thank Big Toe, Ronald Torreyes, who had some incredible moments for the Philadelphia Phillies last year. He was supposed to be a utility guy, and Alec Boehm's struggles in 2021 forced him into a starting role over at the hot corner. And man, did he exceed expectations. The team fell short, but it wasn't the fault of one Ronald Torreyes. He became part of a mini folk hero story here in Philadelphia, if only for the 2021 season. So, want to say thank you to Ronald for what he did here in Philadelphia. Best of luck the rest of the way. In Philadelphia, we don't often get to say that about players. Either they're gone so quick because they stink, or they stay so long, we grow to find a reason to dislike them. Or we love them and we hate to watch them go. Ronald Torreyes was kind of the nice middle ground between all of that, where he was a nice player who had a great story. He had a great year, played above what he's probably capable of, and now you're comfortable watching him leave and happy if he has success elsewhere. So, Ronald, thank you for what you did in 2021 for that team. Appreciate you, and best of luck with the rest of your major league career. That's all I've got for you today. We've got an interesting game going on as I record this with the Colorado Rockies in Game 2. I'll get to tell you all about that tomorrow, as well as the full episode of a crossover with Sully, Paul Francis Sullivan, the host of Locked On MLB, which, by the way, thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Make your second listen, that Locked On MLB podcast with Sully. When you hear the crossover, you'll know why. He knows everything about baseball inside and out, the stories of the game. He's a student of history. He loves history, not just of baseball, but in general. So he knows about the past and he can link it up to stories from his past. It's an awesome listening. So go check out Locked On MLB with my buddy, Sully. Thank you. That's all the time, rather. Whew, crossing over my words a little bit. I got so excited about the crossover with Sully, I can't even speak when I think about how much fun we had chatting about the Phillies. But thank you for listening to Locked On Phillies. Make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing, checking us out on YouTube, everywhere you get your podcasts as well. I appreciate those subscriptions and the 5-star reviews, everything you could do to help make Locked On Phillies grow. Thank you very much, and thank you for your listen. I will talk to you all about Game 2 of the Philadelphia Phillies and Colorado Rockies series tomorrow.